What's up, YouTube? Portfolio sitting on 175,749. We're up $8,000 on the week, and that's mostly because of Meta. I hold a leaves position in a couple of shares on this company. Today, I want to do a breakdown of Meta and why they're up so much, some of the news around it, and where I think they're going to go. They have earnings coming up in a couple of weeks, so this momentum is really important. I want to talk about with you guys as well a little bit more on Amazon, Google, and Microsoft and where they're sit for me. Those are my three other biggest positions on the portfolio, but I'm extremely happy with Meta right now. If you were scared of AI spend, if you're scared of Meta and Zuck in his place, you're kind of kicking yourself right now because they had a 15% week. And let's do a breakdown here of how that looks from a portfolio in my position when it comes to Meta. I hold a deep in the money call that expires in 2028, and I'll show you guys here in a second how that looks. But this has a 340 strike, so that means that this contract is deep in the money. So in Meta today is trading at 666, which is the devil number, so we got to change that up. But 665, there we go. But this contract has around 93 shares worth of exposure, and that's mainly why my contract's up so much and my portfolio is up so much when it comes to Meta. So just today, for example, we're up $3,300 on Meta. That represents 10% of that contract. And let's look at the week view right here. We saw a 30% return or 27.6 return when it comes to Meta, or $7,800. So super happy with that. This morning, we actually saw our all-time highs here for this contract at $8,500. Actually, I lie. We saw all-time highs back in January when I bought this contract, and I was actually really close to selling it off. So check this out. We saw a 30% return, and I bought this contract just a couple of weeks before January 29th, and I was up around $10,000, and I thought of selling, and I didn't. And that's because I believe in Meta for the long term. This contract expires in 2028. And let me show you right here when it comes to degrees, because this is more important than anything else. And in this example, the thing that matters the most here for us is delta and theta. So theta has to do with daily decay. So every day that I hold this contract, it loses $7 in value, because it's kind of like the rent that I pay to have this leverage. And the delta represents how much exposure I have to the underlying. If $1 of Meta goes up, my contract goes up 93 cents. So I basically have 93 shares worth of exposure with this contract. So this is how this looks. We're actually on the green finally. If you guys can see right here, I was actually down $8,000 not very long ago. June 25th was like, what, 20 days ago? That's not that long. So I was down $8,100, and times were tough, and Meta was not going my way. I never really doubted the company, to be honest. Whenever I get into a position, I do a lot of due diligence and understand that I'm not selling this thing unless the thesis changes. And throughout this process, from January to now, the thesis hasn't changed a thing. And I'm not saying that Meta is back. Like, we're still very far from all-time highs, like 20%, 15% from it. But the thesis hasn't changed for this company. The whole thing with them is that they make 98% of the revenue from ads. So think about it. If they're building all this infrastructure, they have 3.6 billion active users throughout their platform. They're a big believer in AI. And I think there's a lot of negative sentiment around Meta because Zuck torched like $80 billion with AI spend on their metaverse a couple of years ago. So the stock has a very negative sentiment when it comes to CapEx spend. But I think everybody's wrong about this company, mainly because they have 3.6 billion active users, and all of this infrastructure they're building now, they're going to be able to rent it out to other companies as well. And we saw news of that last week, and we saw a big rip on the price. So if you guys look right here, I think the news were around last week on the 9th. Price reflected those news, and that's mainly because people just want an excuse to buy Meta again. If you guys recall, like back whenever we had those tariff dips and everybody was so scared of the market, and any news of a peace treaty, the NASDAQ would move up, like any hint. And then we finally got the peace treaty, and the NASDAQ had their best day in like years. So I think Meta is in that position now where it's been beaten up so much, and the market just wants any news to push this company up. And this week we saw a couple of those. They're also going to launch their own AI model to go against Anthropic and OpenAI with their AI models as well when it comes to their infrastructure. And I mean, Meta is a dominant player when it comes to AI spend. And I think this reflects their negative sentiment. They trade today at a $1.5 trillion market cap. And I think we're going to see multiple expansion for them to go and trade into the 30s and high 30s, hopefully, by the end of the year or next year. And that will represent at an all-time high, of course. And we're going to see price reflect that as well. So I'll get my face out of the way. This is where we trade right here. And you guys can see there's a clear inflection upwards. And we see earnings on the 29th. And it's going to be very telling to see on what's going on financially with this company. We're going to see forward guidance for AI spend. We're going to see forward guidance for AI monetization, which is the big picture here for Meta. They're spending $145 billion on AI infrastructure, and the market's really scared they're not going to be able to monetize on this. So this is where I sit for Meta. I'm happy that the stock is moving up. However, the thesis is not fully baked, I think, for the public yet. So, we take our wins here. They had a 13% week, which is fantastic, in a clear move upward and, very positive for us. But if we look at year to date, we're basically flat. So this is not necessarily a good thing for us that are Meta investors. But if you look right here on the 1 year, we're actually down 8%. And if we look even more extreme, we were down 28% during the March lows. And just a couple of weeks ago, this thing was down 25% year to date. So it's clear that this stock has seen a lot of pain and a lot of drawdown in these last couple of months. A couple of bearish news with Meta is they're getting sued by basically every state in the US, and that results to trillions of dollars worth of lawsuit and litigation when it comes to them. But they're not going to win these lawsuits. They're talking about how their platforms are addictive. Something else to think about as well, they've never ran a cloud business. So they came out with those news were leaked by Bloomberg, that they're going to start renting out their compute, just like GCP and AWS and Azure, to other companies because they're building so much of it. In neocloud stocks like Nebius, for example, it sold off so much. Iron's another one. They just sold off so much because that's all they do. They're neoclouds. They manage all of the infrastructure and rent it out to other people. Not as complex as AWS and GCP, because those companies have their own models within those systems that they have. And those systems have been around for a minute. So they have all of these different data classifications. Meta has never ran a AWS business of the like ever. So that's something to understand as well of the stock. But overall, I think they're going to keep doing what they do, which is selling ads to businesses. And those ads are going to get better at doing their job. And they're going to be able to monetize even more on these people. So like I mentioned, they have 90% of the revenue coming from ads. Maybe they expend the revenue going into cloud compute and renting that infrastructure out. That could be a line of business that they could expand into. But I think they're just going to be able to serve more customers with their ads, and they're going to be better at doing that. Price per ad is already going up so much for them. I think it was in the 18%. So every ad that people spend on Meta is up 18%. So that's a lot of money. If you think about how much money Meta makes, they just literally got an 18% raise. To think about that Meta is getting so much negative sentiment this year is bizarre to me. And we saw a phenomenal week, and our position is up $4,100. And I'm happy to see this on the green after we saw this down $8,000 just not very long ago. So let's talk a little bit more about the portfolio. This is an all-time view here of my options. So we have Amazon 135 call, which is a leaps contract that I bought over a year ago. And honestly, Amazon has been kind of disappointing to me, to be honest. Yes, $2,200, this is a phenomenal gain. But if we look right here, a couple of months ago, I was actually up close to $5,000 on this right here, representing a 34% return. And I didn't sell, mainly because of capital gains. And I've done this in the past where I've been up a good bit of cash and I just haven't sold because of capital gains. And it's dumb of me because I was up $5,000 and now I'm getting close to expiry, which is in January. And I still have a little bit of time for Amazon to move my way. And I'll hold this up until August, which is when I bought this contract. And it would be more than a year for me to get long-term capital gains treatment. But lessons learned, $200 is always a good return. I'm not saying it isn't. Around $5,000 worth of returns. And this thing has just moved sideways. It has been really frustrating to trade Amazon these last couple of months. And honestly, this whole year. But that's where I stand with Amazon. We'll see what I do with that cash. I have around $12,000 in this position right here. I'll probably roll this out because I still think Amazon is undervalued. Big fan of this company, honestly. Looking at crypto right here, we're getting beaten up. Let's look at their last price. Bitcoin is trading at 63. So yeah, we're just trading sideways. Ethereum the same way. Nothing new with crypto. Extreme fear still around. And until sentiment changes on this underlying, we're going to be hovering around the $60 to $65, maybe $70,000 for Bitcoin and Ethereum, honestly, don't see us going past $2,000 anytime soon. We need sentiment to change, but there's a lot of momentum going into chip manufacturers. We saw a cool off this week, but they're back. They're back with all their strength. Micron is trading up. SanDisk is trading up again on Friday and yesterday. Let's look at our Amazon position. I only have a couple of shares right here representing a 32% gain. My Microsoft position, which is another big conviction I have, I'm actually down 5%. And we're actually seeing somewhat of a recovery here. We traded negative 1.6% this week. But again, we saw a lot of pain with Microsoft, very similar to Meta. People just don't believe these companies are going to be able to monetize on their AI infrastructure. But when it comes to Microsoft, for example, they run Microsoft Azure, which is their cloud business, and they have hundreds of billions of dollars worth of backlog. So they literally have people knocking on the door trying to give them money, and they can't serve these customers because they don't have the infrastructure needed to do so. So they have hundreds of billions of dollars worth of backlogs and future cloud commits that they have. So if you look at Microsoft Azure, they've been growing like more than 40% year over year, which is a phenomenal business within Microsoft. They, of course, have their Office 365 business, which is so incredibly sticky. And almost every enterprise on this earth runs Microsoft products. And if you see right here, they had a previous all-time high of 542, and I have a 408 cost basis. So this is really cool to see. I have 106 shares. If we see all-time highs this year, we're going to see a big little bump here on the portfolio, helping us get to that $300,000 mark by the end of the year. Like I've told you guys, this is my goal, and we'll see where we land. Over the past 5 years, it's actually been a big laggard. If you think about the Mag 7, they've been lagging behind. And honestly, I think the market has just overlooked the stock for a very long time. And I'm a big believer in Microsoft, mainly because their cloud business is so resilient. Their enterprise business with their software licenses are also extremely sticky. And I'm a big fan of this company, and I have 106 shares of it. So talking about Google, another big one of my positions right here, we've had a good run. As you can see, $25,000 worth of gains. And mainly in this last year, that's because Google was getting beaten up just like Microsoft is and just like Meta is right now. And I bought the stock because I believe in the company. And I feel like this is not rocket science. You got to buy stuff that doesn't really make sense right now, but you know that they have solid bones and that their revenue is predictable in the future. And that's where I think Microsoft and Meta are today, and even Amazon. And this is, of course, not financial advice. It's just what I'm doing with my money, and I'm sharing here with you guys. So this right here, about 1.8 shares of Meta, and they are up 21%. So I almost timed the bottom, which I think is really cool. I had some extra cash, and I'm like, I want a little bit more exposure to Meta because I think they're a fantastic company. Marvell has been lagging behind a little bit, but my exposure to them is somewhat low, only 20% here on the red, and some other of the softer stocks that I've covered in a different video, and I won't get into it right now. But that's where the portfolio is sitting. We're actually climbing out of that hole. If you guys see right here, we're trading in the 151, which is insane, June 25th, and now we're trading in the 176. So we saw a $16,000 or so, maybe a little bit less, $14,000 upward move for the portfolio in just a matter of like 15 days. So that's how fast things can change for you. And you just got to hold these positions and be resilient whenever your portfolio is falling. So let's look at the 3 month. Let's look at how we're doing right here. We're up 8.8%, representing $14,000. In year to date, we're actually up 8.6% at a $14,000 mark as well. On the 1 year, we're still in the green at 27%. And I appreciate you guys being here. This is what I got for this week. I want to talk a little bit more about Meta and why I think this company has done so well this last couple of weeks. And very happy with it. We have earnings coming up on the 28th, which will be very telling to see where this company is going to go. And if that negative sentiment is gone for good, which hopefully it is, and upward momentum drives us back to all-time highs. So happy Friday to you guys. Have a great weekend. I appreciate you being here. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. I'll talk to you guys soon.